Hi everyone, how's it going? Salem Barahmeh here. I'm with my colleague Inès.
Hello.
Can you make sure you turn off your videos, please? Hi everyone, can you make sure you turn off your videos? We're just going to wait for a few more people to join and we'll get started right away. But can I ask of everyone who just joined us to turn off their videos, please? Thanks everyone. It's really exciting. We've had people from all over the world register. We've had people from Brazil, the US, France, Egypt, Jordan, all parts of Europe, all parts of Asia. It's quite incredible to have you all with us today. So I guess we'll get started. My name is Salem Barahmeh. I'm the director of the Palestine Institute for Public Diplomacy. We're an independent NGO that is committed and has the mission of sharing the story of Palestine with the world. We're a team of young Palestinians, and the idea of PIPD was born out of a frustration of how Palestine is perceived by the world, it's understood by the world, how Palestinians are seen, and how they understand of what we aspire to. So what we do is we try to present a human face and aspect to Palestine so we can try to connect with people. And we do that usually through digital campaigns, mostly on social media, that today have reached about 100 million people over the last 2 years. And we do these campaigns in French, in Spanish, in English, in German, etc. And so today, one of the projects that we've been working on for a while is Palestine VR, which is what we're bringing you today. And Palestine VR was born out of when two members of Congress from the US, Congresswomen Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, were denied entry into Palestine by Israel. And for us, we were frustrated that they couldn't come see the reality on the ground. So we thought, how can we bring that to them? So we ended up developing this app, the Palestine VR app, which essentially brought Palestine to not only them, but the rest of the world. The app is free. It's available on the Apple Store and on the Google Store, and you are able to download it and go check out these tours by yourselves. And the thing is, I firmly believe that coming to Palestine and seeing this place can be life transformational, right? And nobody comes in and leaves the same way. And for us, for many people, actually, a lot of Palestinians around the world, they're not allowed to come, similar to the two members of Congress. So we also wanted to share parts of Palestine, parts of that reality, so people can get a sense of what's actually going on. So I'm joined today with my colleague Inès Abdel, who's our advocacy director. I'll leave her to say a few words, and then we'll run you through a bit of housekeeping and start the tour.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. And we're so happy that so many of you joined us. Yeah, so I think, the objective here is that because you hear so much on the news, usually you hear a lot of concepts, now announcement of annexation by this government from the left to the right in Israel, and you heard of the Trump's plan of occupation, and a lot of the times it's not easy to understand all these concepts and what to make of them. And we want to break that idea that, this is an intractable conflict that cannot be resolved, and change a bit the way people, frame the way they understand. And I think the best way to do this, we think, is to actually take the people on the ground. So this is why, we start from letting Palestinian voices and Palestinians show you the reality on the ground to reconnect the political discourse with the reality. So I think we'll have time after to discuss more some of these, political framings and what it means. As you know, our North Star for us is really about how do we build a future where Palestinian rights are upheld, where fundamental rights and freedom for Palestinians is upheld. And so how do we reach that is really by first starting to address the root causes of the oppression and of the conflict. So you can see by yourself in a minute, what does it mean for people in their daily life?
Yeah, and so just quickly before we get started, the best way to experience these tours is going to be on a laptop. So if you have a laptop, I advise to switch on it. The other thing is with these virtual reality files, they're quite big, and Zoom isn't usually the best form of technology, but it's the best we have. So sometimes there's a bit of choppiness in terms of the video, but the audio should be fine. So you'll see some of that as we show you some of the tours. And finally, throughout the tours, we're going to open up the chat box for a Q&A and to share a few things with you. So I please be respectful and thoughtful, and refrain from saying anything rude or vile or racist, etc. Because we've known a lot of these meetings have been attacked before. So I would really appreciate it, and let's keep this environment one of solidarity and thoughtfulness.
Sorry, just housekeeping as well. It seems that we have some limit on the Zoom link. There was a little problem, so please, for all those who are not able to attend or enter the meeting, because apparently we are now on a 100 people's limit. Please go to the Facebook page. We're live on Facebook, so you can see everything there on Facebook. We'll have time for Q&A, and so we'll let the people in Zoom ask the questions. So sorry for the people on Facebook, but you'll have all the answers, and you can see the questions for people. Absolutely.
So a lot of the people who are giving these tours, so you'll hear from different Palestinians, but also Israelis that show you different parts of Palestine and show you different systems of oppression and injustice. And the common denominator between all these people is that they're not only about coexistence, but coexistence. And we very much subscribe to certain values that extend to everyone we work with, which are freedom, justice, equality, and rights for all. And this penetrates every aspect of our work, from our campaigns to the Palestine VR app. So the first place we're going to start with is Gaza. And as many of you know, Gaza is the most densely populated area in the world. There are about 2 million people living in an open-air prison. Gaza's been under siege for about 13 years, almost entering 14 now by Israel, and not a lot can go in or out. And so you can imagine during a pandemic, the people in Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza, are extremely vulnerable. One, because social distancing is extremely difficult in a densely populated area. Two, there's also been a lot of destruction, and from all the Israeli bombings and assaults that have happened over the years that have took many lives and left many injured and many homeless. So the first part of the tour is going to start at someone's home that was demolished recently, and the tour is given by a young Palestinian who's a student in Gaza. So here we go. And by the way, I'm able to move around in 360 from the app on my phone. So this is part of the fun. So every time the screen moves, this is me moving the screen throughout the tour. Sometimes I'll pause to give a bit of context, but here we go.
Shalom, you have 5 minutes to empty your house. That's the Israeli alarm for thousands of Palestinians moments before the shelling of their houses begin. 5 minutes for Palestinians to realize the size of helplessness, weakness, and pain while they collect themselves and their children on the destruction of their houses, and to wake up the next morning on the no-shelter catastrophe. This policy of the Israeli occupation has increased in the recent escalations on the Gaza Strip since 2008 that violates the international law. Entire families have died under the rubble of their houses. Memories and dreams were buried by the Israeli missiles, and those who were lucky enough to survive have to live in tents near the demolished houses, or in iron boxes known as caravans, or in the UNRWA schools, where they accommodate their helplessness and pain. This policy adds even more on their daily struggle that is life for Palestinians living in Gaza. I'm standing here on what's left from Muhammad Zuhrub's house that was targeted by Israeli warplanes 3 months ago. In spite of that, Muhammad got married the last week. He wanted to express that war will never affect his life by holding his wedding above the rubble of his destroyed house in Khan Yunis, south of Gaza Strip.
So, I mean, that's part of the resilience of Palestinians in Gaza. You have entire generations that have lived under siege, that have never left, that know only the sound of planes and bombs and destruction and death that is around them. And they continue to survive. A big portion, the majority of Gazans live under the poverty line. Unemployment is in the highest in the world. Youth unemployment in Gaza is 70%. Which is unimaginable. And add to this a lot of the economic impact that is going to reach the world because of Corona and the economy's coming to halt. So imagine what it might be like to people in Gaza. The other aspect in Gaza is that their medicine is not allowed in, medical equipment is not allowed in. And that has left 2 million people living in the most densely populated area in the world without the proper and necessary tools and equipment and medicine to take on the virus when it hits. And so at the moment, Gaza is in an imminent crisis, humanitarian crisis waiting to happen because of this pandemic, but because of also the Israeli siege that has been placed on them. So the second place we're going to go in Gaza is the Gaza hospital. This is the main hospital in Gaza.
Probably the place that you would hear about most frequently when there is an escalation on Gaza is Shifa Hospital, where I'm standing now. It's in the middle of the Gaza city, and it's the main hospital there. It becomes the busiest place during escalations, and many patients and injuries would be transferred in from different hospitals throughout the Gaza Strip. Neither staff nor medical tools are sufficient. With the frequent power cuts and lack of gas, many patients and injuries are at risk of death due to this shortage. The hospital's capacity is low due to limited rooms, and like you would see patients lining the corridors. Here is the surgery building. That's the entrance. Here are the storage, and that's the reception building.
I should also note that Gaza has very limited ICU facilities, and even before Corona hit, they were 70% occupied already. And you can imagine what that's like when you're trying to deal with a pandemic. So the next place we're going to go is in the West Bank, and it's in the heart of the West Bank. It's the city of Hebron, and Hebron is kind of where some of the ugliest parts of occupation and apartheid have come to be manifested. It's one that is horrific by any measure. And so the next tour is going to be given by a group of young Palestinians called Youth Against Settlements, and they try to raise awareness about some of the things taking place in Hebron. The first one is going to be in the old city of Hebron that you'll see now has become almost a ghost town because a lot of Palestinians have been driven out and either been forced to shut their shops or Israeli settlers have taken over their buildings. So here we go.
Hello everyone, my name is Muhammad Afisha. I am from Hebron. I'm from Youth Against Settlements. Today I'm gonna take you around Hebron, the old city, in a small tour to make you discover the life in H2 area where Palestinians live and suffer from the Israeli settlers. Let's go. We are standing now at the beginning of Shuhada Street. This street used to be the main street in Hebron, which connects the north of the city with the south of the city. Shuhada Street in Hebron contains several Palestinian markets, such as the yogurt market, the camels market, the vegetable and the fruit market, and also the Palestinian bus and gas station. The Palestinians lost their access to the street after the Ibrahim Mosque massacre, which was committed by an Israeli settler called Baruch Goldstein, who comes originally from New York, Brooklyn. So he entered the mosque, killed 29 Palestinians, and injured more than 170. So after the massacre, the Palestinians lost more than 1,800 Palestinian shops inside of the street, lost more than 1,000 Palestinian housing units inside of the street, and Palestinians who owned businesses in the most important part of the city with businesses They lost all their businesses. So 1997, Hebron was divided into H1, H2. H1 is under Palestinian police control, H2 is under Israeli.
And just to note, this is an Israeli checkpoint that separates streets within Hebron itself, a Palestinian city, based on ethnicity. And even if you were a resident before, you need a special permit to even travel and go through.
Control. H2, where Israeli settlers live, where Israeli settlers attack Palestinians, also violate the rights of Palestinians every day. So after the massacre, we lost one of the most important parts of the city, and we were victims, and we were punished for being killed. That was the system of the Israeli occupation soldiers inside of the area, just to take over the area. So Shuhada Street was closed. The massacre was well planned just to take over the city center from the Palestinian owners. We're talking about now 36,000 Palestinians living inside of a restricted part of H2. They're getting attacked every day by the Israeli settlers and the Israeli soldiers who are living inside here and protecting the Israeli settlers who are living inside of here. They are not protecting the Palestinians, only the settlers.
So now we're going to move to a street next door, which is a Palestinian market. And as you will see, Mohammed will explain, the bottom is made up of Palestinian shops and stores, and the buildings, the floors above have been taken over by Israeli settlers.
We're standing now below the third Israeli settlement in the street, which is called Avraham Avinu settlement, which means Abraham is our father. This settlement was built on the top of the Palestinian vegetable and fruit market, which is behind of these stores, and also on the top of the Palestinian stores, where they occupied the top floors of the stores, and also they built new building on the top of them. The Israeli settlers who live in these buildings, or in this building, they keep throwing rubbish, stones down on Palestinians, all kind of rubbish they don't need, they throw it down on Palestinians, plus pouring skunk water on Palestinians. And you can see just right here, the rubbish, the sticks, the stones, everything they don't need, they throw on Palestinian passengers who pass from here. Two Israeli military watching towers watching this settlement, one to my left hand and one to my right hand. They see everything the settlers are doing, and they ignore the Palestinians when they complain to the soldiers. But if the Palestinians do something back to the settlers to defend themselves, these Palestinians might be attacked, might be killed, and at the end, they will be arrested because of attacking back the settlers. But the Israeli soldiers, they say to the Palestinians, we are here to protect the Israeli settlers, not the Palestinians. So while passing from here, you might receive on your head a stone or pouring skunk water they don't need on your head. And then you cannot just complain and you cannot do nothing to them. You might shout to the soldiers, but they will completely ignore you as a Palestinian.
So this is what it's like to be a Palestinian living in Hebron. As you can see, the city is extremely segregated based on your ethnicity. So you're treated one way if you're a Jewish Israeli settler, and another if you're a Palestinian. And to put that into perspective, the next door is going to be on the other side of the street, and it's going to be done by the director of a group called Breaking the Silence. Breaking the Silence are a group of Israelis who were former soldiers, and they are now fighting against the occupation, against apartheid, and they take tours of people around Hebron to show them this level of segregation.
So we're standing on the Shuhada Street right now. This is the main drag of Hebron, the main street of Hebron. Used to be once a bustling market. You can actually see the road right here and a map of what this looked like till the mid-90s, and even more so during the second Intifada. So the place we're standing now.
Just a note, so see these people walking by in these cars and the green bus that passed earlier. These are Jewish Israeli cars. And so even if the two members of Congress were allowed to enter Palestine and were able to come to Hebron, they won't be able to enter this place. This is reserved for only if you're Israeli and Jewish Israeli. So yeah, we'll continue with the tour.
And everything you see around you is closed off for Palestinians. And after the Goldstein massacre, We see hundreds of stores and shops closed down. And later on, the peak of the second Intifada, we see an expansion of that, turning Hebron into a ghost town. We see three reasons why this happened. The first and foremost is the separation policy. You can see the separation on the roads here. Everything you see around you is closed off for Palestinians. And you can see roads, areas that are closed off, basically allowing settlers to walk around freely and preventing Palestinians to do so. The second reason is military presence, which is really our sort of bread and butter. You can see soldiers and checkpoints all around you here. Right in front of me now, there's a soldier. Soldiers' orders are to make their presence felt, to instill into the Palestinians the sense that they're being controlled. I served mostly around Nablus and Jenin, a short time in Hebron, but a big part of what I did my service was part of that, from barging into homes to patrols to making my presence felt. But this is a big part of what soldiers serving here in Hebron have been sharing with us and breaking the silence for.
So this is a glimpse of the way the systems of oppression are set up in Hebron and the way Israel intimidates and segregates between different parts of the city that were taken by settlers and where they drove Palestinians out. Now we're going to go slightly north of Hebron to the city of Bethlehem, obviously very well known, well regarded city. We're going to get a glimpse of the wall, the apartheid and segregation wall, and this tour is given by Fadi Qattan, who is a chef and a restaurateur in Bethlehem.
So the wall, separation wall, separates Bethlehem lands from Bethlehem lands, but also separates Bethlehem from Jerusalem, and it has transformed the northern entrance of the city into a very ugly place where we see how houses end up surrounded by that separation wall. The art on the wall, well, beginning of the artworks on the wall was in 2000.
I just want to note two things before I let Fadi continue. The first is that this wall is a few times bigger than the Berlin Wall. And it, as you can see around us, it cuts right in the middle of Bethlehem. I mean, it literally cuts families and communities from each other. And it's quite ugly and massive.
2003, early on when people started wanting to express themselves. And there's always been a discussion among Palestinians and internationals on how do we portray the wall. Do we leave it in its ugly grayness of separation until we get rid of it? Because that wall has to go. You know, the wall is not only in Bethlehem, it's separating on 840 kilometers long Palestinian lands. It's transformed a lot of our cities into open air prisons. And people ask themselves the question, do we beautify it by doing art on it? Do we leave it as a canvas for people to express themselves? Or do we leave it in its ugliness until it disappears?
So we'll just pause quickly. We're going to open now the chat function in the call. So if you have any questions about the tour so far or anything in general, please just add them there, and we're going to start answering them right after we're done with the second part of the tour. Also, as you can see, there are different tours for each city. So there are multiple locations and there are multiple places around Palestine and tours given by different people. So what we're going to do is also include a link to our YouTube page. So if you go subscribe, we're going to start releasing these tours and many more on YouTube, so you can access them, and they're going to be in virtual reality in 360, so you can experience them in a very similar way, and also use goggles, VR goggles if you have any. So please take the chance now. The chat will be open for the next remainder of the tour, and we'll try to address them as soon as we're done. So now we're going to go to we're just going to go right around the corner from Bethlehem, from the wall. And it's in Aida refugee camp that is in Bethlehem. And this refugee camp is made up of refugees that fled their homes in 1948, and what we refer to as the Nakba. Nakba means catastrophe in Arabic, and actually the day we mark the Nakba, the anniversary is the 15th of May, which is in a few days. And basically about 750,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes. Many of them live in the region, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Syria. Some live within Palestine, within the West Bank, and many are spread around the world. And these Palestinians are not allowed to return. They can't even come visit and see their homeland. So this is Aida refugee camp where a lot of them, where some of them have come to live. The wind, I'm just gonna quickly describe this, is because some of the wind is quite makes it quite hard to hear. But if you look, you see the wall and how it snakes all the way into Bethlehem, and basically it cuts off the road from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. And this would have been the road the patriarch would have come to on Christmas, for example, from Jerusalem to Bethlehem to celebrate Christmas. And as you can see, the wall, on the other side of the wall, you see trees. And these are Palestinian olive trees. These are Palestinian farms that were annexed when Israel built the wall. And so Israel didn't build the wall on the 67 line, which should have been the border of a future Palestinian state, which is the crux of the two-state solution, but it built it inside the West Bank and tried and was able to annex a lot of land that way. And in the distance over there, you can see that's an Israeli settlement, and you can see how close they are, and where the fact that they're built on Palestinian occupied land within the West Bank. And one thing to point out, you can see here, so this is the refugee camp, all the way across to the right. And one dominant feature is the water tanks. And the water tanks, every Palestinian home, regardless of whether you're in a refugee camp or not, has water tanks. Because we only get 2 days of running water in Palestine, regardless of where you are. And the reason for that is Israel controls our entire water source. And the water source actually runs from north to south of the West Bank. So it's within the West Bank. But 83% of that water is diverted to settlements. So while Palestinians have to be very judicious in the way they use water and these tanks, Israeli settlements, you can't see from this point, but none of these settlements have water tanks because they have 7 days of running water a week. While a lot of them are green with pools and are allowed farmland, while most Palestinians are struggling to have enough water to survive, and a lot of Palestinian farms are brown and barren. And you can see how even in terms of water and a basic necessity for life, there's a segregation based on who you are and your ethnicity. And the last thing I say is, with the environmental crisis, this is only going to make the matters worse. So from Bethlehem, we're going to go further north near Ramallah to a town called Nabi Saleh. Nabi Saleh has been in the news because of Ahad Tamimi, and now we're going to hear from Ahad Tamimi's cousin, and this is very close to Ramallah, and also there's been an Israeli settlement that's built on their land right next door.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jahad, and I'm 13 years old. I live here in the village of Nabi Saleh, and I'm the youngest registered press card-carrying journalist in the world. Right now, we are at the entrance of the village of Nabi Saleh. As you can see, there is a checkpoint. We have 2 checkpoints at the entrance of Nabi Saleh, which I have to go through every single day. I go to my school or go to the mall or anywhere. And this checkpoint, like when it's closed, instead of me going to my school in about 25 to 30 minutes, I have to take another long way that takes me about 3 hours and a half to go to my school and to reach the city of Ramallah. And right here, as you can see, we also have the Israeli settlement that is called Halmish, which was built on the land of Nabi Saleh, which is only about 50 meters far from the village. And here we have the Israeli occupation tower, which we have a lot of Israeli soldiers in it. They always come down here and just close this gate and close this checkpoint. And that is the entrance of the village of Nabi Saleh.
Cool. We have two more destinations. The next one is in the Jordan Valley. It's the Bedouin community of Khan al-Ahmar. This community was already displaced once in 1948 from the Negev Desert, which is in now southern Israel. And they're constantly under threat by Israeli authorities for their eviction. And the reason why is because they live in a corridor of what is known as E1. E1 is an area that is the last bit that connects Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, to the West Bank. Israel has built settlements all around East Jerusalem, trying to disconnect it completely from the West Bank. And this is the last remaining bit. And that's why they're constantly harassing and trying to evict them.
As we walk in this path of destruction in the town of Khan al-Ahmar, we're reminded by the many times that Israeli soldiers have come into here to destroy homes, to attempt to destroy schools, and to simply destroy people's way of life. Now, what's the goal of all this destruction? Why is this indigenous Bedouin community under attack? If you look on top of the hills, you see the settlements encroaching. Now, these settlers have gone through, with the support of the Israeli government, extreme measures to try and remove the citizens of this town. Dozens and dozens of children. What is the final effort? It is to connect these settlements and spread all across these hills until they get to Jerusalem. And then from Jerusalem to also connect a settlement infrastructure down to the Jordan Valley. What would happen? Jerusalem would be completely besieged with settlements, and the West Bank would be cut in half, making it impossible to have a contiguous, sovereign Palestinian state. So that you can have just a small idea of the amount of suffering imposed on this community, the settlers had just a few months ago put their sewage and sent it down to the valley. And the valley down there to our right was filled with fuming, toxic sewage that led to the children becoming extremely ill. People couldn't breathe because the smell was so bad. And yet the community decided to remain. When Israel last year attempted to send in bulldozers and made a decision to forcibly destroy this whole town and kick out all of its citizens. The citizens here said, we will be resilient, and Palestinians and international solidarity activists came to Khan al-Ahmar, and they stayed in a tent on that side of town to ensure that when the bulldozers came, people would non-violently stand in their way. But this community remains under threat now more than ever because of the expanding extremism of Israel's right-wing government and the plans ahead of the Israeli elections where destroying this town could be a ploy to help Netanyahu get a majority.
And as we've seen that Netanyahu and now with Gantz and the coalition government is going to be the prime minister again, and a big part of what they were promising Israelis was annexation, and this was to highlight some of the elements of how Israel does that. The final place we're going to show you is Jerusalem, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Inès to chat to you and answer some of the questions that have been posed to us. So for Jerusalem, we're going to listen and hear from an Israeli lawyer and an expert on Jerusalem to talk about how Israel has been, annexing different parts of the city over the last couple of decades.
We're overlooking one of the large settlement neighborhoods of East Jerusalem, French Hill. Since 1967, Israel expropriated 1/3, 33% of the privately owned land in East Jerusalem belonging to Palestinians, and we built 55,000 homes in settlements like this for Israelis. We built less than 600 homes for Palestinians, the last of which was in the 1970s. The goal of these policies was to create a robust Israeli majority and to make the city indivisible. On both accounts, we have failed. Jerusalem today is more binational than ever before, with 40% of the population of the Palestinian sector. And in all likelihood, in 20 years, there will be a Palestinian majority in Jerusalem. And the city is more divided between Israelis and Palestinians than ever before. The question is whether this will destroy the possibility of the two-state solution. In the past, a principle was established that some of the settlements like this would be incorporated into Israel in the framework of a land swap, and the Palestinians would be compensated with equal size, equal quality land elsewhere. So there would be a Palestinian state based on the 1967 boundaries with limited, equitable, equal agreed land swap. Whether this option remains today, we don't know.
As you can see, there has been a very intricate system of displacement, discrimination, segregation, oppression, and injustice that permeate every part of Palestinian life. And in many ways, it's very simple, but also it's done very subtly and in a complex manner. And so to really understand a lot of these things, there's no substitute for visiting and seeing that reality on the ground. So if you can come, do come. But the alternative, through technology, you're able to visit a lot of these places. And so we're trying to add more tours to Palestine VR. We're going to be adding them to YouTube initially, but also we'd like to add more tours across the board of more places that we haven't been able to film in yet. So we need your support for that. We started a crowdfunding campaign on LaunchGood, which we'll share a link in the chat box with you now. And so a contribution allows us to provide a platform for many of these people who are trying to tell the stories of the fight against injustice and oppression. So I hope we can count on you. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Inès to answer some of your questions, and hopefully it'll be a fruitful chat.
Thanks a lot. And yes, there has been some questions about other places. We've obviously, we have been slowed down, including because of the COVID crisis. But the idea is that we want to add more tours. Someone asked about drone image, but I think that, the VR is more with 360 images. So it's not really for drone images, but that's something that other partners are doing. So we had some interesting questions that I'll try and answer now. I'll try and answer the first one we received about access. Someone who's Arab American asked if he would be able to visit these places. So there is one thing to remember, is that Israel is controlling all the borders. The Palestinians don't have any port, airport, or border that they control. So that means that when you have a foreign passport, you have to be let in by the Israelis. So if you have a foreign passport, you can come in. But obviously, if you have family in Palestine or Palestinian family, good chances that you will get some trouble. But legally, you are able to enter. And so hopefully, please come do and visit. It's very important. It's also a beautiful place. And, we also organized this tour and this app because of the limited access that people have. And obviously now with the COVID crisis, that might not, ease anytime soon. The other question I had was about international law. So yes, I won't do a course on international law here, but as you could see, I mean, this dispossession and why we are reaching now annexation, which everyone repeats, it's a breach of international law, has been built over decades, and since 1948, when there were multiple UN resolutions, starting with the partition plan, and multiple UN resolutions that were adopted for calling for a self-determination for the Palestinian people, for the return of refugees. All of these are adopted by the UN, the General Assembly, and the UN Security Council is supposedly here to enforce rules of international law. Unfortunately, the UN system is what countries make of it. So it's up for countries to hold accountable those who violate that international law and take measures and sanctions. But unfortunately, there has been no measures and no sanctions taken on Israel, and they haven't been held up accountable for the past decades, which means that they were able to, build up these settlements, continue to build these settlements that are illegal under international law, because you cannot transfer your population in occupied territories, and eventually, with the aim to annex, these lands. So by transferring Israeli settlers to the West Bank, by constructing all these roads, by fragmenting the Palestinian territories into bits of small islands, they have effectively violated international law over the past decades, but very little has happened. So, now there is this red line of annexation. Annexation would actually mean that they just transform in their legal system in Israel what's actually de facto happening on the ground. And many actors and many partners are also very proactive in mobilizing the International Criminal Court, which is not tied to the UN system, but it's another system where basically all the countries who have signed up to the Rome Statutes, which is the convention for the criminal courts, they can complain to this international justice body. And so hopefully we'll have some investigation into war crimes in Palestine, Israel, in the ICC.
Yeah. Are there any other questions do you want to address?
For now, I think, I think we're good.
Cool. Well, we're going to keep the chat open, and Inès will answer some more questions. One thing I wanted to share with you is this map. This map is actually not a Palestinian map. It's a map done by the Obama administration, and I believe in 2015 or 14. And basically what they show is everything in green is under Israeli control, and everything that is in white is under Palestinian control, but even then not full control. Because Israel, as we mentioned, controls the water, it controls the movement between cities and towns, it controls who can go in and out. It also controls the border. As we mentioned, members of Congress can go in, a lot of Palestinians and Arabs around the world can come in, even a lot of non-Palestinians or Arabs who want to visit, who stand for certain values are not allowed in. And basically, as you see, Israel's already controls the majority of it. And as we're saying, annexation, the talk of annexation, we hear it, but we also have been living it for decades. And so what is the system that we currently live under? Because everything, so the West Bank, the stuff in white, and Gaza and East Jerusalem were supposed to be part of the Palestinian state, under the two-state solution. But as you can see, it's no longer viable because you have essentially population centers that are islands in a sea of Israeli control. So in this system, if you're Jewish Israeli, you have the full spectrum of rights and laws that are afforded to you. But if you're Palestinian from 48 or a citizen of Israel, you are a second-class citizen. You are unequal within that system. So basically, there hasn't been a new Palestinian city within Israel since 1948. There are over 65 laws that discriminate against Palestinian citizens of Israel. There is a nation-state law that passed in the Knesset Israeli parliament that claims Israel is the homeland and nation-state of the Jewish people. Now, then you have the Palestinians of Jerusalem. The Palestinians of Jerusalem are neither citizens of Israel, nor they have Palestinian nationality. They're under residency law, which is something that can be revoked under any time. And as you can see, the resources that are allocated to Palestinians in Jerusalem are extremely different to the ones that are allocated to West Jerusalem, the Jewish part of the city, and the Israeli part of the city. And even now in COVID-19, when we're supposed to be at home and social distancing, Israeli authorities are demolishing Palestinian homes and leaving entire families homeless. And this is the type of segregation that people in Jerusalem live under. Then there are the Palestinians of the West Bank and Gaza. And we're under, I'm from the West Bank, I live in Ramallah, I'm under Israeli military law. And so the settler that lives right next door, the hill next door, they're under Israeli Knesset law. And so that's civilian law. So if I put up a post, a political post or anything on Facebook, I can get a knock at 2 a.m., be dragged to an Israeli court and be tried. And there's a 99.9% conviction rate. Where a settler who is under civilian law might commit a violent crime, and there's almost a 0% chance of them being convicted. And again, that's solely based on who you are and your ethnicity, not what you have done. And the final discrimination is based on who can return. Any Jewish person from anywhere around the world can come back to visit or to live. Any Palestinian cannot. And so you have a tiered system that either holds you to be unfree or unequal, and it's based on your ethnicity. And under international law, this system that maintains the oppression of one people over another to maintain supremacy is known one thing. And this is, again, just going back to the legal definition of everything we've showed you and described, that is known as apartheid. And that apartheid system exists in this one-state reality because Israel pretty much controls everything. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Inès.
Yeah, I wanted to actually put a bit of back in the context of this coronavirus crisis, so maybe some of you can understand what it means, especially in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem, I think, embodies what is forthcoming for annexation of the rest of the West Bank, because actually Jerusalem has been annexed back in 1980. It was occupied, then annexed, and so a lot of the neighborhoods now in East Jerusalem that's occupied, but that the Israeli municipality considers as a whole of Jerusalem, were caught in this very tricky situation where they were ignored by the Israeli municipality and state, receiving no information about the COVID in Arabic, no testing facilities. Half of these neighborhoods are now behind that 8 meters wall. So they were in this no man's kind of land for receiving healthcare, because the PA, the Palestinian Authority and government, they are not allowed to operate in Jerusalem. So actually the governor of Jerusalem, appointed by the Palestinians, as well as volunteers, were arrested by the Israeli army just during the crisis, because they were distributing information for people and kits, hygiene kits. A testing clinic that was, put up in Silwan, one of the neighborhoods, was also destroyed and closed by the army. So you see how, basically you are at the core of what just people's fundamental right to healthcare and information was just really, impacted by that regime in place. So I just wanted to give that one example. I think, we had another question. I think we can go back to accountability. Yeah. Because when we talk about international law and basically what can be done, because obviously a lot of what we are showing to you is very depressing, and it's not very fun. And the question is then, what can you do and what can we do? And I think as citizens of other countries living in your countries, whether it's the US or Europe or elsewhere, there is a lot that your governments have at stake here and that they have an influence on. Obviously, it starts, in the international community, in the UN by their vote, but we know that that's not enough. So, for example, in the US provides billions in military aid to Israel every year, and that's not being questioned. Countries have not yet questioned their relationship with Israel based on respect for international law and human rights, and that should happen now. So questioning military aid, questioning military trade, questioning and actually having trade with settlements in occupied territories banned, because these settlements are illegal. So you are in your supermarkets buying goods that are produced in the settlements, and you don't necessarily even know about it. So there are a lot of measures that you can hold your own elected officials accountable for, so that Israel starts to also see a cost to the occupation, because right now for them the status quo for the system, and as you can see, building up with the extreme right and the right government joined by the left for annexation, for them it's a pretty comfortable situation because they don't see a cost to all these illegal actions. So there is a lot that can be done, and we can share a lot of the campaigns happening, a lot of the groups and partners we work with that are also doing an amazing job. So just to also give you a bit of hope, because we really believe in citizens' power, because today it's about shifting the power balance. It's about changing how we perceive these things on the ground, not just between two people who cannot agree with each other, but actually in one, as Salem said, one regime that controls one people over another.
And just to I guess close it off, and to add to what Inès was saying about accountability, this is not about who you are or where you're from. It doesn't matter if you're Palestinian, Jewish, or German, or American, or whatever. This is about the values you subscribe to and you believe in. And so if you believe in freedom, justice, equality, and rights for all human beings, then you should look at the situation that is ongoing here and say, I need to act. Because as Inès was saying, a lot of governments and countries are complicit in making this situation or allowing the situation to continue. And so as you look at the world around us, even within COVID-19, you have those, we live in a very polarized world. Those who believe misinformation, believe conspiracy theories, believe that the virus was a hoax. Those who believe in surveillance, those who believe in walls, those believe in not communities that celebrate what's shared between us, but what makes us different. And I think we need to break down these walls and stand up for the values that we believe in. So I guess the final message we leave you with is, let's stand up for our shared values. A system like this in 2020 should no longer exist. Everybody that lives between the river and the sea should be free, equal, with justice and with rights. And we don't want to go back to normal when COVID-19 is over. That is not normal. We want to go into a world that is able to uplift everyone and regard everyone as free and equal. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure having you. We're very sorry for those who were not able to make the meeting. If you caught it on Facebook, that's amazing. What we'll do is we're going to send the link to everyone who set up with the full event, the recorded event, and they can rewatch it, and we'll share everything from links to everything. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you stay safe and healthy, and do check out all our other work on Facebook, Instagram, etc., to stay involved in our campaigns and advocacy.
And never hesitate to private message us with ideas, questions, because we know that in 1 hour we cannot answer all your questions. So obviously, if you have further insights or information you want, do message us, and we'll follow up by email and message.
Thanks so much, everyone. We'll end the meeting now. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.